Football has a long history. Football in its current form arose in England in the middle of the 19th century, but alternative versions of the game existed much earlier and are a part of football history. Welcome back to another episode of Football Academy. Subscribe to be part of the Football Academy community. Check out the limited time offer links in the description. The first known examples of a team game involving a ball, which was made out of a rock, occurred in old Mesoamerican cultures over 3,000 years ago. It was by the Aztecs called 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐞, although various versions of the game were spread over large regions. In some ritual occasions, the ball would symbolize the sun, and the captain of the losing team would be sacrificed to the gods. A unique feature of the Mesoamerican ball game versions was a bouncing ball made of rubber. No other early culture had access to rubber. The first known ball game, which also involved kicking, took place in China in the 3rd and 2nd century BC under the name 𝐦𝐤𝐤𝐞. 𝐦𝐤𝐤𝐤 was played with a round ball, stitched leather with fur or feathers inside, on an area of a square. A modified form of this game later spread to Japan and was known by the name of 𝐾𝐽𝑒, practiced under ceremonial forms. And perhaps even older than 𝐦𝐤𝐤𝐾 was 𝐸𝐴𝐴𝐷𝐾, played by Aboriginal Australians, and according to white immigrants in the 1800s, it was a ball game primarily involving kicking. The ball was made by encased leaves or roots. The rules are mostly unknown, but as with many other early versions of the game, keeping the ball in the air was probably a chief feature. Other variety of ball games have been known from ancient Greece. The ball was made by shreds of leather filled with hair. The first documents of balls filled with hair are from the 7th century. Ball games had, however, a low status and were not included in the Pan-Hellenic games. In ancient Rome, games with balls were not included in the entertainment on the big arenas, also known as amphitheaters, but occurred in exercises in the military by the name of harpastum. It was the Roman culture that would bring football to the British island, Britannica. It is, however, uncertain in which degree the British people were influenced by this variety and in which degree they had developed their own variants. The game of football takes its form. The most admitted story tells that the game was developed in England in the 12th century. In this century, games that resembled football were played on meadows and roads in England. Besides kicks, the game involved also punches of the ball with the fist. This early form of football was also much more rough and violent than the modern way of playing. An important feature of the forerunners to football was that the games involved plenty of people and took place over large areas and towns. An equivalent was played in Florence from the 16th century, where it was called 𝐽𝐡𝐢𝐬. The rampage of these games would cause damage on the town and sometimes death to the participants. These would be among the reasons for the proclamations against the game that finally was forbidden for several centuries. But the football-like games would return to the streets of London in the 17th century. It would be forbidden again in 1835, but at this stage, the game had been established in the public schools. But it took a long time, however, until the features of today's football had been taken into practice. For a long time, there was no clear distinction between football and rugby. There were also many variations concerning the size of the ball, the number of players, and the length of a match. The game was often played in schools, and two of the predominant schools were Rugby and Eton. At Rugby, the rules included the possibility to take up the ball with the hands, and the game we know today as rugby has its origin from here. At Eton, on the other hand, the ball was played exclusively with the feet, and this game can be seen as a close predecessor to modern football. The game in rugby was called the running game, while the game in Eton was called the dribbling game. An attempt to create proper rules for the game was done at a meeting in Cambridge in 1848, but a final solution to all questions of rules was not achieved. Another important event in the history of football came about in 1863 in London, when the first football association was formed in England. It was decided that carrying the ball with the hands was not allowed. The meeting also resulted in a standardization of the size and weight of the ball. A consequence of the London meeting was that the game was divided into two codes, association football and rugby. The game would, however, continue to develop for a long time, and there was still much flexibility concerning the rules. For one thing, the number of players on the pitch could vary. Neither were uniforms used to distinguish the appearance of the teams. It was also common with players wearing caps. The header was yet to be a part of the game yet. For further reading, the development of football rules. Another important difference at this stage could be noticed between English and Scottish teams. Whereas the English teams prefer to run forward with the ball in a more rugby fashion, the Scottish chose to pass the ball between their players. It would be the Scottish approach that soon became predominant. The sport was at first an entertainment for the British working class. Unprecedented amounts of spectators, up to 30,000, would see the big matches in the late 19th century. The game would soon expand by British peoples who traveled to other parts of the world, especially in South America and India, would the interest in football become big. Globalization of the biggest sport in the world. In the late 19th century, only a few national football teams existed. England and Scotland had the first active teams that played games against each other in the 1870s. Today, there are 211 national associations included in the Fédération Internationale de Football Association, or FIFA, the world governing body of the sport. Another proof of the globalization could be seen in the increase of nations participating in the World Cup qualifiers, from 32 in 1934 to over 200 in 2014. The world regions have been divided into 6 confederations: Confédération Africaine de Football, or CAF, Asian Football Confederation, or AFC, Union des Associations Européennes de Football, or the UEFA, the Confederation of North, Central, and Caribbean Association Football, or the CONCACAF, Oceania Football Confederation, or the OFC, and Confederación Sudamericana de Football, or the CONMEBOL. And with that, we've reached the end of this video. If you enjoyed it and you found it interesting, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.